for the top 8. Hello and welcome back to coverage here at GP Seattle. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Reed Duke, and boy do we have a match for you. Sam Black versus Steve Rubin, 2 high-level professional Magic players facing off in the quarterfinals here. Only one will advance. The matchup, Reed, is lands for Sam Black versus 4-color control for Steve Rubin. Who's happy and who's sad as they sit down?
Happy is Sam Black. In fact, not just about this matchup, but the entire way that the top 8 bracket has broken for him. Lands is a deck that excels against these fair strategies like the one that Steve Rubin is playing, the fair blue decks, and has a weakness against opposing fast combo decks. Wow. Couple big picture thoughts about this top 8 bracket.
Yeah.
No fast combo. Nowhere to be found.
Oh, yeah. Weird. No Storm. No
Sneak and show. Mm-hmm. Also no Blood Moon. So the two big pitfalls of the lands deck, Sam Black's not going to have to worry about those for the rest of the tournament.
You liking his chances here?
I'm liking his chances. I don't mean to project it that the 4-color decks have no game in the matchup, especially after sideboard. You're going to see Steve Rubin bring in a lot of potent threats. But this is the reason that you play lands, to get matchups like this. So Sam Black has to be as happy as possible going into the top 8.
Kind of funny, Steve Rubin immediately Force of Will the Exploration. Not a ton of great targets for Force of Will in the matchup. Life from the Loam's a card they just end up getting back anyway. And he wants to make sure that Sam doesn't have one of those explosive starts and start recurring things. So he countered that, exiling a Baleful Strix. We have Mana Bond now for Sam Black. Is he running just one of the Mana Bond?
That's right. 4 explorations and 1 Mana Bond as effectively a 5th exploration. If you've never seen Mana Bond before, it allows you to put all of your lands from your hand onto the battlefield during your end step, but the cost is that you have to discard the rest of your cards, which when you're discarding Life from the Loam, that's not necessarily that big of a deal.
Steve's sacrificing 2 fetch lands here. See what he digs up. And I believe that he has announced a counterspell of some sort.
Yeah, the actual card counterspell.
Really?
Which we haven't seen this one cast that much over the course of the broadcast, but we have actually 3 players playing with good old-fashioned counterspell, both of our Miracles competitors and Steve Rubin.
This is really the format where that card lives, right? Like, people don't play it in Vintage that much.
No, in Vintage, you see Mana Drain instead. Mana Drain just effectively a strict upgrade over counterspell. And even that is sort of minimally played. But here in Legacy, counterspell is a perfectly acceptable reactive card, especially when you're packing Snapcaster Mage.
Brainstorm now for Steve Rubin, of course, the sort of premier card of the Legacy format. We have seen a million of those cast this weekend already.
Couple more big picture thoughts about the top 8 bracket, Marshall. We have 4 players with their takes on these multicolor blue mid-range decks. We talked about Daniel Duterte and Noah Walker on very traditional Grixis Delver decks. That's the deck that you expected to face if you registered for Grand Prix Seattle, the deck that we expected to be very popular and perform well. Then we have Steve Rubin and Jeremy Dasani with a couple of different takes on non-Delver, slightly bigger. We're calling them 4-color control decks, although Jeremy Dasani is actually just plain old Sultai control. And then my pick for the coolest deck in the format, in the top 8, is Miranda Keith with Maverick.
Oh, yeah. I'm a big fan. We've seen this Maverick deck multiple times, you and I really thought it was great.
Yeah, the other deck that we saw a lot of that's sort of a close cousin to Maverick is Death and Taxes. That's the Mother of Runes,
which is actually what I meant, but yeah.
And a lot of times that we saw it on camera, it was doing some cool stuff, but mostly losing, to be honest with you.
Yes.
So the fact that Miranda Keith had this alternative take on a similar strategy and was the one to make it to the top 8, I wonder if she knows something that the rest of the format doesn't, if she's a little bit ahead of the game in terms of the best way to use cards like Mother of Runes and Thalia, Guardian of Thraben.
Our old friend Jace the Mind Sculptor is now on the battlefield thanks to Deathrite Shaman. Deathrite Shaman, an extremely annoying card for this lands deck. As much as it focuses on lands and what they do on the battlefield, it's actually a pretty graveyard-centric deck. And Deathrite Shaman can pick off some of the really important engines like Life from the Loam or the lands that they're going to target. And now Steve's used it to power out a Jace the Mind Sculptor while leaving up a Mana Still.
So Jace is a huge play for Steve Rubin here. I mentioned that Sam Black has to be happy to be paired against these fair blue decks. And the reason for that is it's very difficult to kill a lands player with basic attacking creatures like Delver of Secrets, because the lands deck has stuff like Maze of Ith and Punishing Fire with Grove of the Burn Willows, and it's got a lot of ways to defend itself against the traditional methods of attack. But Jace the Mind Sculptor is a very, very effective threat against lands. The fact that Steve Rubin was able to counter the two cards that would accelerate Sam into his mid and late game and then play a quick Jace the Mind Sculptor, this is just exactly what he wants to be doing, especially in Game 1 before he has a lot of his most important anti-graveyard tools.
Yeah, what can Sam even do? I mean, Jace the Mind Sculptor, are we going to see an ultimate here at some point? Or how does the game end if Steve wins it?
Well, it depends how Steve wants to play it. My inclination would be to just brainstorm a bunch of times with Jace, and in that way you can effectively win the game without ever actually winning the game, just by burying your opponent in card advantage and finding a lot of answer cards. However, this is Game 1, and lands is a very niche strategy, so Steve Rubin's relatively reactive deck is going to have a lot of dead cards and not a lot of answers to the very specific threats of Sam Black, like Merit Lage, that can be made off of the Dark Depths Thespian stage combo. Of course, Jace the Mind Sculptor is an answer to Merit Lage, but only if Sam Black is forced to make the token at sorcery speed. If he does it at the end of the turn, it might just take one attack to finish off Steve Rubin. And
Steve Rubin's going to start that avalanche of cards that you just described here, Reed, by brainstorming immediately on his turn.
The cards that Steve Rubin is most excited to be drawing into are Baleful Strix, both to, continue digging for more cards through his library, but also to be a chump blocker that will ensure he doesn't die to surprise Merit Lage. He also has one copy of Diabolic Edict that would do the same job, perhaps even better, by killing off the token. And then beyond that, just finding more counterspells, Force of Will, to make sure Sam can't land an Exploration or run away with a bunch of iterations of Life from the Loam.
Here's Liliana of the Veil.
Okay, this is an interesting one. The discard element attacking the lands player's hand is not terribly effective, but what is terribly effective is ticking up towards ultimate against a deck that can't really attack your planeswalkers with creatures. And if Sam wants to try to combat those two planeswalkers with Punishing Fire, he's going to have a lot of work to do.
Steve also leaving that Deathrite Shaman available. There's crop rotation.
Okay, so what's happening here is at the end of Steve's turn, Sam Black is floating 1 mana and sacrificing his Ghost Quarter to crop rotation. So this might be his window if he can get Dark Depths. Remember, he has 1 mana floating. He did tap that Ghost Quarter. If he can make Merit Lage here, he might just win.
He might just win on the spot?
He might just attack Steve Rubin for 20 damage here.
Does Steve have a way to interact?
Steve Rubin has 1 card in hand, and it's a Brainstorm. And notably, he was at... I'm sorry, I think we did not have the life totals correct. Steve couldn't have been as high as 19 because he did cast a Force of Will and a few fetch lands. Oh, maybe he could because of Sam's Grove of the Burn Willows. Anyway, the reason I'm so hung up about the exact details of Steve Rubin's life total is if he can activate Deathrite Shaman, no creatures in the graveyard anyway. It's going to be tough for Steve to survive a hit from Merit Lage. I think we're down to Steve Rubin is going to cast Brainstorm, and if he has Diabolic Edict in his top 3 cards, he will win the game. If not, he's going to lose. Here we go.
Wow. No, he just got the game stolen from him. That is Sam Black, and his new friend Merritt Lage taking care of business. Boy, I'll tell you what, that is one of the differences with Legacy. If you would have snapped in on almost any match of Magic and seen one player has a few lands on the battlefield and the other one has Jace the Mind Sculptor and Liliana of the Veil and said, yeah, he's just dead at 18 life, you might not have believed me.
Yeah, that was wild. I wonder if Steve should have main phased the Brainstorm to try to hit a Baleful Strix as a blocker for Merritt Lage. That was really Sam's. I mean, you said it, Marshall. Used the advantage that Steve Rubin had in that game. Sam Black was going to have to win that turn, or probably not at all.
Wow, incredible theft there from Sam Black. He's up 1-0 here in our first quarterfinal match. Thank you so much for joining us for Sunday Night Magic. This, of course, is where we bring you the top 8 of the tournament. We've been keeping an eye on what's been going on in Legacy here. I can read you the archetypes for our top 8 if you're curious and just joining us. It's Grixis Delver versus Miracles, Sultai Control versus Miracles. There's 2 Miracles total in the top 8. 4-color Control versus Lands. That's what we're watching here. And then there's Grixis Delver versus Maverick. So there's 2 Grixis Delver, 2 Miracles, Sultai Control, 4-color Control, Lands, and Maverick. That's what comprises your top 8 here in Seattle.
So I think that means 24 copies each of Brainstorm, Force of Will, and Ponder out of a possible 32. 6 fair blue decks that are leaning heavily on those cards. And the 2 outliers, Sam Black with Lands and Miranda Keith with White-Green Maverick.
That's right. Let's take a look at Steve Rubin's deck list, and this is kind of funny. The chat's calling us out. So, when we do these GPs, we have what we call the 6 shows, right, where we break up the rounds into different kind of feel and approach for us in the booth and that kind of stuff. And the last show of any GP is Sunday Night Magic. Turns out it's not Sunday at all. So they kind of called me out. They said that my time machine has maybe malfunctioned. I guess it's Saturday Night Magic this time. I look behind me and our graphic even says Sunday Night Magic. But
well, if that's bothering you so much, then TiVo the broadcast and watch it tomorrow night.
Yeah. Well, good looking out, Chad. Come on, it slipped through the cracks a little. Also, we're gonna have Sunday Night Magic tomorrow. Also, we're just gonna run it right back again.
All right, so things are gonna change a lot after sideboarding here, as Steve Rubin's going to be able to bring in Surgical Extraction, which can hit either Life from the Loam or Punishing Fire, or just one of the key lands in the lands deck.
Oh, Rich just said, no, it's still Sunday Night Magic. He doesn't care that it's Saturday. Defiant Rich Hagan has spoken. I'm with him, by the way. No, we're not calling it Weekend Night Magic. Sorry, we didn't mean to interrupt you.
All right, you guys going to let me do my job now?
Yeah, we'll get out of your way now.
Okay, Sylvan Library is a good card as well. That's a non-creature threat that can help Steve Rubin dig to other disruption. Don't think Liliana the Last Hope is going to come in. Him the Turok is an option, probably more of a consideration for this game where Steve Rubin's going to be on the play, on the draw, likely too slow. But definitely that Diabolic Edict. You saw that was the one out he was drawing to at the end of the last game, and he would have definitely won if he had it. Merritt Lage, just a big consideration for these decks that don't have access to Swords to Plowshares.
Okay. Can we take a look at their deck list for shot? Oh, geez, you were all over that.
Meanwhile, Sam Black, when he plays against these fair blue decks, he usually doesn't have to change too much because his main deck configuration is already geared for the matchups. But things like Drop of Honey to take care of those annoying Deathrite Shamans and even True Name Nemesis is a strong consideration, and Tireless Tracker as a way to circumvent the graveyard hate that he knows Steve Rubin is bringing in against him. Those are good options as well. And Choke, of course, against any deck that's so heavily reliant on the color blue and the fetch shock mana base that you see in virtually all Legacy decks.
I'm just Tireless Tracker. I'm just blown away at the impact that card's had. I remember seeing it and wondering, is this good enough for Standard? Probably.
Yeah, I mean,
obviously it was just a blowout in Standard. Now it gets played in Modern and even Legacy.
Tireless Tracker is probably one of the best cards printed in the last half decade. It's like you said, been a huge player in a variety of different formats. in a variety of different strategies.
Yeah.
And here it's a really great sideboard card for a deck that's playing more than 30 lands.
Yeah, they never miss their land drops, do they? And it also just hits from a completely different angle, right?
Right.
Like Sam is effectively creatureless in game 1.
Yeah, if you're Steve Rubin, what are you going to do? You're going to leave in Lightning Bolt against the Merit Lage Life from Loam deck just to answer those 3 Tireless Trackers that may or may not be coming in. It really puts him in a tough spot.
I would not be sad to see a Tireless Tracker win a Legacy GP. I just think that's such a sweet card. I also don't think it's broken, right? Like that to me is the perfect, super powerful, right? Look, obviously it's powerful. It's made it all the way here to Legacy. But it's not the type of card that you just simply cast and it's great. And, it takes some work. Sacking the clues is a little slow. It's a little expensive. The creature doesn't have any abilities. Once it's on board, it just gets big. I like cards like that.
Yeah, most definitely. It's very funny for a format like Legacy that can function at such a wide range of speeds, anything from a turn 1 or a turn 2 kill from those fast combo decks to really grinding it out with Tireless Tracker after sideboarding.
Seriously.
All of those strategies are valid depending on the subtleties of the matchup.
Steve Rubin's going to have to kind of get his bearings back. He really just had the rug pulled out from under him on that first game. Looked like he was well set up to win, but a crop rotation from Sam Black out of nowhere culminated with a 2020 Flying Indestructible Merit Lage token, and that one-shotted Steve Rubin to give game number 1 to Sam Black. But now it's time for game number 2. Both players have kept, and we are underway. Land go from Steve Rubin. Kiss that land goodbye, says Sam Black. It's going to be a wasteland. Tap it for blue. Play a Brainstorm.
Yeah, I don't think Steve necessarily needs to cast the Brainstorm here. There's not really anything he's digging to. And on that note, he also could have considered playing a fetch land to avoid the turn 1 wasteland. He is pretty excited about casting Hymn to Turok early if he can, but now it looks like he's not going to be able to do it till at minimum turn 3.
Thoughtseize from Steve Rubin. And I'm going to let, he's going to make his choice here and write down some stuff, but I saw one little subtle thing there from Rubin, which is that he put both cards back on top of the library, and the top card was Badlands. He drew it, and it barely touched his hand, and he played it. If you were paying attention, you knew that was a card that he drew. He didn't do the little shuffle thing. Sam Black has another Wasteland in hand. Is he trying to, or is there any consideration from Sam's side that this might be the only land that he has?
Well, you bring up an interesting point. I would say at face value, no, because normally if you see someone play a land off the top of their library, you tend to think that they didn't have a land in their hand and they just drew it. But the fact that Steve had just brainstormed mean that
it could have been any card.
Yeah, it could have been any card. He had access to both the cards in his hand and the top 2 cards of his library, so it didn't really matter where the Badlands came from.
Okay.
However, it could be some kind of subtle, let me implant the idea into your head by using that familiar body language of playing a land right off the top of my library.
Mm-hmm.
But
I love
just from a
tiniest little wrinkle,
Yeah, from a psychology perspective, it's a super interesting question. From a actual way the cards are played at a baseline level, it's not that important.
All right. Well, Sam does go ahead and Wasteland anyway. That seemed to be his plan. And it was Choke that Thoughtseize ended up taking away from Sam Black. He's now got Mox Diamond and is deciding what he wants to discard.
So both players with just fantastic hands this game. You saw the Thoughtseize pretty interesting there, as Sam Black had a wide variety of very powerful spells but no colored mana. And wow, actually Steve Rubin is going to capitalize on that dynamic by casting Force of Will on Mox Diamond and stranding Sam for at least a little while with no colored mana.
Nice. Countering a Mox Diamond. I like it.
I have to say that Sam Black's hand matched up very, very well against Steve's. In particular, the double Wasteland against Steve's hand that was going to be more focused on fighting the spells in Sam's hand. But Steve is able to still put together 2 lands, and he's going to cast Hymn to Turok here.
Well, Sam is actually threatening a triple Wasteland start here as well. He drew another one.
Wow.
Yeah.
Steve may have found Sylvan Library, which in round 15, if you were with us, was a huge determining factor in Jeremy Dasani winning his win-and-in match. But Sylvan Library, super powerful card, especially when a game's going like this with both players trading off resources and the game shaping up to go long. You even see Steve Rubin not going for a second black mana.
So no him this turn. Yeah, he's just going right for it here. Kind of interesting, though. I think he's actually got a counter spell in his hand, Reed.
So he had to choose, in other words, between
Bayou, yeah.
double black and double blue.
Exactly. And he went for blue.
So Sylvan Library is, I would say, the closest thing to a Sensei's Divining Top that you still have access to in Legacy. Mm-hmm. You get to both stack your library with each draw step, and if you have a high life total and would like to invest 4 life, you get to draw extra cards. So this is very powerful in a format with fetch lands and where you're digging to specific answer cards, like in a matchup against lands.
And here we go. This is the part where things usually start to go strongly in the lands player's direction. We mentioned it at the offset of our program here. Life from the Loam getting back a bunch of lands, and he got back Wastelands.
Well said, Marshall. This is exactly where Sam Black wants to be, a drawn-out game where he's able to cast Life from the Loam each turn. Life from the Loam, you can't even really stop it with a counter spell because it's just going to come back next turn. And if this was game 1, I would completely agree that the game is going in favor of Sam Black. However, you see a really important card that Steve Rubin picked up off of his Sylvan Library is Surgical Extraction, and that's a way to put a stop to the Life from the Loam before it can do any real serious damage.
Or in this case, maybe after it's done some serious damage. It did get him back 2 Wastelands and something. He just has to slog through all of that.
I suppose so.
I mean,
Steve Rubin has 2 basic lands in his deck, a swamp and an island. That's not really that helpful, as he's going to be losing likely his Underground Sea and his Tropical Island over the course of the next 2 turns.
Ponder. Steve sees a Snapcaster Mage.
Steve Rubin down to 7 here, so he's going to draw the best card off the Ponder. I think he's probably going to fetch with his Polluted Delta and cast Hymn to Turok. Actually, he may cast Surgical Extraction before Hymn to Turok. I'm not sure what he'll do. It's tempting to want to use your mana and preserve the 2 points of life with Surgical Extraction, but I do think it's pretty important to cast Hymn to Turok, as it would be great for him to knock one of those Wastelands out of Sam Black's hand.
Surgical Extraction down to 5 for Steve Rubin. Target Life from the Loam.
Oh, man.
That is a grip.
Yep.
He's got Thespian Stage plus Crop Rotation, the triple Wasteland, which he got back.
If Sam Black wants to play it a bit slower, he can even play a Wasteland and copy it with Thespian Stage.
Oh, yeah.
The downside is that he won't be able to Wasteland right away, but if he wants to take a more long-term approach of Steve Rubin, I'm going to destroy every land you play for the rest of the game, that might be something that he will consider.
Yeah, because he has a Thespian Stage on the battlefield already, plus another in hand, plus triple. I mean, he has access to effectively 5 Wastelands. That seems like it would be hard to slog through.
Really like the way Steve Rubin resolved that Surgical Extraction. He took an extra second to take a quick look through Sam Black's deck, see if he could notice any very specific sideboarding decisions that Sam Black had made that would inform his decisions for the rest of the match. But he didn't take more time than the rules allow. I think that's a model that players should try to follow, where you don't rush things, you're not careless, you take a little extra time to soak up information, but you're not really spending that 90 seconds or 2 minutes that's bordering on breaking the rules or slowing down the pace of the match too much.
Mm-hmm. Sam Black immediately uses a Wasteland on the Tropical Island, sending it to the graveyard and leaving Steve Rubin with just 2 lands left.
And Steve did not cast him to Turok there. I'm a bit surprised by that. I guess he wanted to. Maybe he's valuing the counterspell.
Does he have Snapcaster? Like, can he snap Surgical here? Get the Wasteland?
Oh, yeah, that's a great point. He can absolutely do that. That's a fantastic play.
Yeah, there's 2 more in hand for Sam, so
that's better than a Hymn to Turok. It's like a Hymn to Turok, but you're getting 2 of the most threatening cards.
Yeah, now the downside for Rubin, though, is that his life total's getting pretty low. Like, he's at 4. If he plays Snapcaster Mage, he could be at 2. He could just die.
Right, to the Punishing Fire.
Right. Like,
wow, so there's a lot going on here, and potentially Steve Rubin flew a little too close to the sun with the Sylvan Library, taking 8 damage. It's tempting. You can't blame him in a matchup like Lands, where your life total is not really a factor. But between Thoughtseize, bunch of fetch lands, Force of Will, Surgical Extraction, I think maybe he should have left himself with 4 additional life. It could have changed the dynamic here.
Yeah, he's decided he can't afford to do that because he knows what's in hand and he would just be dead on board.
So what he's going to do is he's going to play a 3rd land and then just spend mana for the Surgical Extraction.
Yeah, this is really awkward for Rubin because even if he keeps his life total above 2, Sam does have Crop Rotation in hand as well. And can just find the Grove of the Burn Willows, right? And just wanted to time him down over the next few turns. By the way, here it is, Snapcaster Mage. Go to 3.
I think that's what's going to happen, Marshall. I think Punishing Fire, Grove of the Burn Willows, it doesn't have too hard of a time dealing 3 damage to the opponent, and it's not like Steve Rubin's putting a clock on Sam here.
And there's Surgical Extraction. Yeah, Sam Black is really able to attack Steve Rubin sort of passively from multiple directions, but there's that Punishing Fire, and it's going to live up to its name. In fact, that's Grove of the Burn Willows right on the top of the hand there for Sam Black, so combo assembled, and Steve Rubin is going to have a very short window to stay alive. And Punishing Fire does a good job against a lot of the stuff that Steve would be doing anyway.
Sam Black also has Barbarian Ring in his deck. You familiar with this card?
Yeah.
Barbarian Ring taps for a red mana, or if you have Threshold means 7 cards in your graveyard, you can pay a red mana and sacrifice it to deal 2 damage to target creature or player. So that, in combination with Crop Rotation, could easily do the last 2 points of damage after Sam is going to probably resolve Punishing Fire this turn.
Ding, there's Punishing Fire. Get it back, and Steve Rubin can only sit here and look on and await his fate. He went down to 1 life briefly, but now is back up to 2 because of the Grove. But a couple of more activations, and we're going to see Steve Rubin's life total slowly but surely dwindle. Oh boy, he found another Surgical.
So that is a possible way to beat Punishing Fire. Hypothetically, if you could counterspell the next one and then tap a black mana to Surgical it, but I think it would require Sam Black playing a little bit carelessly with his Grove of the Burn Willows for Steve to actually make that happen.
Right, because Sam can always respond, right? So Steve, he has to wait for Sam to say, I want to tap Grove of the Burn Willows, put this triggered ability on the stack. Then Steve has to be able to have that window open. So it's really up to Sam if he lets that happen.
Correct. And Sam can even,
tricky.
If he has more mana available, he can even Crop Rotation for yet another copy of Grove of the Burn Willows, all in response to the Surgical Extraction.
I guess he could. Did he have him? Yeah, I guess he couldn't do it all. He needed another black mana to try to spin the wheel, just him and hope to hit it.
Yeah.
But he couldn't actually get away with that one here. And Sam just says go. He's going to be patient, wait for the upkeep, say kill you. Rubin says no. Counter spell, and this is actually the key interaction Because if Sam Black goes for it and doesn't have a backup plan or something, Steve actually gets to surgical away that punishing fire.
Well, we might see the crop rotation in response.
Right, that's what I was thinking. And it looks like it happened.
Steve actually just said okay.
Yeah. I thought he was going to force Sam to show him another Grove here, but
worth noting, Steve is now up to 3 because he countered the punishing fire, and Sam still had to give him 1 life back to return the punishing fire.
Okay. Oh, man, this is getting kind of interesting. Like, I still feel like Sam's, not a lock, but extremely ahead.
It's so hard for Steve Rubin to win from here.
Yeah, but, like, he's kind of maneuvering a little. Like, surgical away all the punishing fires, it's a real thing, right?
Yeah. Again,
a lot of time.
It's tough to accomplish that, but it's possible and would result in Steve Rubin having a much better chance of winning.
Let's see if he can do it. He knows he's in bad shape. Chipping away at that Snapcaster.
Sam should just show patience here in terms of not trying to rush things.
Here's punishing fire going on the stack. Rubin says, "You got me to 1." Again.
Now, if Sam activates Grove of the Burn Willows, Steve is going to have to respond with surgical extraction. And then what?
Ghost Quarter for Sam Black.
Trying to figure out if Sam can get Barbarian Ring and enough mana and Threshold this turn. I think he can.
This is a good way to get Threshold.
Steve Rubin trying to keep track of what's going on here, as am I.
Well,
I think Sam has the Barbarian Ring on his radar. I'm not exactly sure why he's doing things in this order, but I do believe that Sam Black is going to find a way to win this turn.
Crop rotation would put the 7th card in the graveyard. And in fact, the 8th.
Yeah, that's it.
And that's it. He can crop rotate for Barbarian Ring, have Threshold. And since these things are all happening, Steve Rubin doesn't have a way to do it. And that's going to do it. Sam Black is going to advance to the semifinals with some deft work with the lands deck there.
A tough pairing for Steve Rubin, and that second game played out in a very unusual fashion, with Steve's life total becoming a relevant quantity very quickly, which usually doesn't happen against lands. I think that Steve, he made a play that made a lot of sense in terms of paying the 8 life for card advantage off Sylvan Library, but I think maybe he hadn't properly evaluated how things changed between Game 1 and Game 2 with bringing in the extra surgical extractions and thought seizes and the way that his life total actually is an important resource. And I think if Steve Rubin had drawn only 1 card instead of 2, he would have had a lot more breathing room and a lot more maneuverability in that game.
All right, sounds like we're going to head away from this one and go over to the table sitting next to them. Why don't we head over there right now? And there it is, Jeremy Dasani and Luke Purcell.
Still in Game 1.
No, they're in Game 2. We got updated. I saw the same thing you did, Reed. But it snap updated by the time we got here. So Luke is on Miracles playing against Sultai Control. This is likely the match that would take the longest anyway, right? A control mirror, or I shouldn't say mirror, a control matchup with Jeremy Dasani casting Jace the Mind Sculptor here and having it resolve. It looks like Luke is down to just a couple cards in hand, if that. 2 cards in hand. And now he's facing down Jace. This cannot be good for Luke.
Well, he picked up his own copy of Jace the Mind Sculptor. So he can match Jeremy, although you'd certainly rather be the first one to resolve Jace than the second one.
Remember when it would kill them?
The old legend rule,
yeah.
Of course. remember the old Legend rule where you couldn't even cast your Jace if the opponent had one?
Yep. By the way, that was Force of Will from Jeremy Dasani. He had 2 cards left in his hand, and he says, I'd like to be the only one with the Jace. Thank you very much. And I will 2-for-1 myself to keep this situation because, as you can see, he draws his card and immediately brainstorms with Jace, and he's going to start generating huge amounts of value from that. Luke Purcell playing around the 2 Wastelands from Dasani by only fetching up basic lands thus far.
Taking a quick look at Luke Purcell's deck and trying to figure out what outs he has to a resolve Jace the Mind Sculptor. The one very clear one is Council's Judgment, but it also looks like he has 2 copies of Pyroblast and 1 Red Elemental Blast, those functionally the same card, that he could cast off of a fetched Volcanic Island. However, against a couple of Wastelands, that's a little bit more challenging than it might ordinarily be. You really only get 1 shot at that because if your first Red Elemental Blast gets countered, you know your Volcanic Island's getting Wastelanded.
So this one's really spiraled out of control since we've been here. In Jeremy Dasani's favor, he just resolved him to Turok to take the last 2 cards out of Luke's hand, which was useless cards at this point. Supreme Verdict in a land. And now Jeremy's actually started plussing Jace the Mind Sculptor. At least he did last turn. And targeting Luke with it.
Yeah, that's not usually how I play Jace, but there's not really any wrong way to do it when you're this far ahead. You can just think about those small handful of cards that I mentioned that can deal with the Jace and make sure you're fate sealing those ones to the bottom. And it's pretty tough for the opponent to get back into it. Although I would still choose the approach of just burying them in card advantage and finding a diversity of threats so that I don't fold to 1 card if the opponent is able to answer my Jace. You can even get into play patterns like you brainstorm, you put 2 weak cards back, and then you fate seal yourself. So in that way you're getting to both dig through your library and increase the amount of loyalty on your Jace.
By the way, I do have some updates for you here from our side matches. Daniel Duterte, the local hero with Grixis Delver, 2-0 against Miranda Keith, defeating our Maverick player. So Daniel's in. He's going to be playing against Sam Black next round.
I'm a little disappointed, Marshall, that we don't get to see Maverick in action.
That
was the last holdout of sort of the brewer in me loving someone making it that far with such an off-the-wall deck. But you really can't deny the power of Grixis Delver. Or
of Daniel Duterte, apparently, because he just isn't losing much this weekend. Noah Walker played against Keaton Wood. That was Grixis Delver versus Miracles. Keaton Wood defeats Noah Walker in 2 games to put the Miracles player on the top half of that bracket. And the match we're watching right now, this is the match that's going to decide who gets to play against Keaton. So if Purcell is able to somehow win this match, it's going to be a Miracles mirror up on that top half of the bracket. On the bottom, it is Grixis Delver versus Lance.
So Keaton defeating Walker. That does not surprise me in terms of the matchup. The Miracles deck being a little bit bigger, having a lot of basic lands, a lot of resiliency against the fast aggression of Delver is certainly designed to have a good matchup there. However, it does surprise me based on players because I don't usually expect Noah Walker to lose any kind of fair legacy match where he gets to play a handful of turns and resolve his brainstorms and ponders. He usually finds a way to win, but Keaton Wood clearly showing that he's no slouch and deserves to be here and beating one of the best legacy players on the planet, Noah Walker. Looks like we're going to game 3. The unanswered Jace the Mind Sculptor, just too much for Luke Purcell and his Miracles deck. And this is quite a battle we've got on our hands.
Really is.
Both decks similar in the sense that they want to hit their land drops, get some card advantage, and eventually stick a Jace the Mind Sculptor.
Also, I have to say, Jeremy Dasani holding it down for Europe. He's the only non-U.S. based player in our top 8.
Is that right?
At least according to my graphic here, yeah.
And Jeremy Dasani, a great player to fill that role, as he sort of represents the entire rest of the world all at once, originally from France, but living in Japan.
That's right. He is a man of the world. By the way, behind them playing there in the hoodie, that's Daniel Duterte playing Grixis. He's actually talking to Lee Sharp from Wizards of the Coast. He works on the digital team, and his lovely wife, Amanda. Let's take a look at Dasani's list here. I really love like this deck, Reed. I'm super into this thing, man. Like, this looks like a really, really good version of, like, my Highlander deck. It's just, like, a bunch of value cards and, you know, kind of control and some 2-for-1s in there. I'm a big fan.
Now, I would describe this as the heir apparent to a deck that used to be called Shardless Sultai. That was a Sultai-colored value deck that played with Ancestral Vision and Shardless Agent, which is a 3-mana 2/2 Cascade, sort of like a Bloodbraid Elf. But the combo there was you could either just get lucky and hit Ancestral Visions and cast it off of a Cascade, or you could actually set the top of your library with a Brainstorm or a Ponder and ensure that you're going to hit it. And that, just in a format where small advantages matter and where it's pretty difficult to get card quantity advantage on the level of a 0-mana 3-for-1, was just an amazing strategy in fair matchups like against Miracles or against Delver. Now, the flaw there is that Legacy is also an extremely fast format, and if you have the draw where you're like, okay, turn 1, suspend Ancestral Vision, you don't even make it to turn 5 all that often against a diverse field. So I like what Jeremy has done in maintaining a lot of the strengths of the color combination and playing a lot of 2-for-1s. Baleful Strix, a fantastic card. Hymn to Torok, of course, Snapcaster Mage. But speeding things up and not being too ponderous or too clunky when he plays against an unexpected strategy.
What about this Miracles deck? Now, this is a bit of a holdover as well, right? I mean, we call it Miracles. Yes, there's Terminus. You can see it in the list there. There's even one in Treat the Angels in Luke's deck. But, you know, I think if I were to come in to Legacy not knowing anything about what had happened prior, I would say, oh, it's like blue-white control.
That's exactly what it is. It's blue-white control. And it's called Miracles because it's in the model of a very familiar deck that people are used to from 2 years ago, which was the Miracles deck with Sensei's Divining Top. But really, it's a functionally different deck without the Sensei's Divining Top counterbalance combo to lock out opponents. And you have to really focus more on 2-for-1 advantages, and you have to find a way to clock your opponent with a Monastery Mentor or whatever it might be. The Miracles deck, I respect it. I don't like it as much as the Sultai control deck. I think you're not doing yourself any favors. You're not getting any easy wins. You have a lot of dead air in your deck in terms of the Ponders and Portents, and you don't have that many cards that really do things. It's just most of your deck is mana, card drawing, or removal spells, and you can't really put too much pressure on your opponent.
Right.
But with 2 players in the top 8, one already in the top 4, it goes to show you that this deck, in the hands of a true master, still has chops.
That's right. You see Jeremy Dasani kick things off with Thoughtseize. He's going to take away one of the 2 Council's Judgments that were in hand for Luke. His hand doesn't look super amazing. It's a lot of removal. It was Swords to Plowshares, another Council's Judgment, and a Supreme Verdict to go with some lands. He's just extremely reactive hand here from Luke Purcell.
It's exactly what I'm talking about, Marshall. I mean, all you can really do is sit around, make your land drops. There's nothing that you look at in your opening hand and get really excited about. But that said, Luke Purcell has his bases covered. He's not going to die anytime soon, so there's plenty of time to draw into action.
Here's a ponder from Jeremy Dasani. Oh, I saw our old friend there. Liliana the Last Hope. Yeah, card that has not showed up in great numbers as far as the deck lists go. But, boy, she's had a pretty good impact and actually looks quite good here as well. You know, going to force Luke Purcell to use a Council's Judgment or something similar on it, because we've seen this, you know, going all the way back to Standard, where an unchecked Liliana the Last Hope will absolutely win the game on its own.
I've been playing a lot of Liliana the Last Hope in Modern lately, and there are decks in Modern that actually fairly closely resemble Luke Purcell's Miracles deck, just straight up blue-white control, Jason the Mind Sculpt versus Supreme Verdict. They usually play with Serum Vision instead of Ponder, so it's a little bit lower powered in that sense. But Liliana the Last Hope does a lot. It can pick off a Snapcaster Mage. It can get you card advantage by recurring your value creatures. And if your opponent is being a little too slow and dirtily, it can tick right up to that ultimate and win the game via -7.
Well, Dasani just got up, and he's back. Perhaps a quick question for the judge. He has another Thoughtseize at the ready. He hesitated, though. He was going to crack his fetch, and then he's like, maybe I don't want to do that. Now he's decided, yes, I do. A little bit of punishment for him. I saw the Wasteland in hand, but he also has Leovold. Can't do both. And there's Thoughtseize. Goes on the stack for Dasani. Wasn't a ton last time. Let's see if it's gotten better. Nope. Same stuff. Supreme Verdict, to Swords to Plowshares, and a Judgment. But this is important because he's now setting up to play Liliana the Last Hope next turn. And as it sits, Luke Purcell has no way to interact. He doesn't have a counterspell right now, and he doesn't have a way to kill it after. He finds a Terminus. We may see Liliana the Last Hope just run away with this thing.
I don't know how much of this removal Luke Purcell left in his deck after sideboarding, but he has drawn an awful lot, an inappropriate amount, quite frankly, of removal in these early turns here.
2 sweepers?
The way I would consider this to be a control mirror match where I'm focused on card advantage, counter spells, planeswalkers, and just having so many board sweepers and Swords to Plowshares is a real liability.
Yeah, and he's probably thinking that exact thing right now because that is Liliana the Last Hope for Jeremy Dasani, and it's land go from Luke Purcell, and this is actually fairly quick. Liliana comes down, goes up to 4 loyalty immediately, will be on 5. 7 is the ultimate, and Luke is not beating that ultimate, right? I mean, the blue-white deck doesn't have that oops, I won factor going for it.
The closest thing would be Entreat the Angels. So hypothetically, if Luke Purcell can just continue making land drops, and then Miracle, Entreat the Angels, make 5 tokens, it could resemble the Merit Lage Dark Depths
kind
combo.
of, yeah. Now
in the sense of making 20 power worth of flyers at the drop of a hat.
We may see him actually sacrifice all of these fetch lands. He drew a Snapcaster Mage, and he may just throw all of the fetches in the bin and just flash back Council's Judgment to take care of this Liliana right now, and that's what he's doing. That was a good draw.
Yeah, here we go.
Dasani puts his hand on his head like, come on, you drew it? The problem is, of course, is that normally you want to use Council's Judgment to take out True Name Nemesis, but the good news for Luke is that he does have 2 sweepers in hand. One he could cast next turn, or either one next turn if he has a land drop.
Right, he's very unconcerned with True Name Nemesis at this stage.
So he can use the Council's Judgment to take out the problematic Planeswalker. And that was a big draw.
Yeah.
Jeremy needs to get something going again.
One little nitpicky thing, if I was Luke, I might have cast the Snapcaster Mage before fetching, because if Jeremy had something like Force of Will, you kind of would prefer to leave your fetch lands uncracked.
Oh, good point. Yeah,
Jeremy drew Force of Will, but 1 turn too late.
Mm-hmm. That's right, and it won't help protect his True Name Nemesis either, as it is Supreme Verdict as an option for Luke Purcell. Now, if he does say land and just hardcast Terminus, he could get another hit in with it if Jeremy wants to use a counter spell, but I wouldn't assume so.
I think Jeremy's just going to transition to winning this game via Sylvan Library.
Wow, what a beautiful spot.
Should be an easy thing to do based on Luke Purcell's excessively reactive hand and the Force of Will in hand for Jeremy Dasani to contend with the nightmare scenario of Entreat the Angels being miracled.
There's a Flusterstorm off the top for Luke Purcell. Doesn't look super great here, though. Sylvan Library all set to do its thing. Although Jeremy is down to 10, so he doesn't get to just go off with the library, but he'll still generate advantage.
Yeah, kind of interesting there, Marshall. It's up for debate whether Jeremy is even happy trading 3 life for 2 here because of the Sylvan Library. 2 life, that might mean the difference between being able to draw a card or not being able to draw a card.
And look at this. Luke says, go.
We saw Steve Rubin punished for drawing too many cards off of Sylvan Library in the most recent game that we watched.
Dasani's trying to make his decision for his Sylvan Library trigger here, which of course lets him look at those top 3 cards during his draw step. He can put any number of them back. But if he wants to draw any more than that 1 card, he's got to pay 4 life per. It's quite expensive. Ooh, Liliana, the last hope. A nice one here for Dasani. He is now hitting on 3 completely different axes. He can win the game by grinding with Sylvan Library, by ultimating Liliana, or just by winning with that True Name Nemesis in 4 turns. So Luke now must react, and he's got to have a lot of different answers.
Yeah, this is a bad spot for Luke Purcell.
Did he just pass the turn back again?
He did. He has a Snapcaster Mage, I believe.
Perhaps he wants to try to set up something where he can pressure Liliana.
Maybe I'm not seeing correctly.
Okay. He does have a lot of cards in his hand. Might have been a counter spell.
Ah, perhaps that's what it is.
Yeah, I think that's maybe a Masters 25 counter spell. True Name Nemesis is going to keep chipping away. It is doing some work. Luke's down to 8. But still, you just got to feel like Jeremy's hitting from too many different angles for Luke Purcell to really come back from this mess. I mentioned it before, but this is our last quarterfinal match going. Keaton Wood, who's playing Miracles himself, is the one who's awaiting the winner of this match, and will be playing whoever it is that wins. Sam Black and Daniel Duterte are going to be facing off in the other side of the bracket. Well, there's one of the most powerful cards in Luke's deck, Jace the Mind Sculptor.
So this is actually going to work out well because it's Portent specifically and not Ponder. Luke Purcell gets to draw a card on Jeremy Dasani's upkeep and Miracle Terminus, therefore, stacking Jace second from the top, which he can then cast with Flusterstorm backup, and not going to say he's winning, but this is about as good as he could have hoped for.
Okay.
If he can actually get Jace to stick on the battlefield with no creatures on Jeremy Dasani's side, that's a start.
There they go. Terminus puts those cards on the bottom of the library. Sylvan Library trigger for Jeremy Dasani.
I really like Jeremy's decision to not fight over that Terminus, knowing the opponent has Supreme Verdict and a wide variety of removal spells in hand. He should definitely just prioritize Liliana, the Last Hope, and Sylvan Library as his win conditions in this game.
Yeah, Luke has managed to leave up Counterspell here as well with a double blue. He's not going to use it on a Deathrite Shaman, though. He's going to let Liliana tick up to 6, and that clock is very real. The Swords of Plowshares that Luke's had in his hand since the beginning. He does find a nice target, though, with that Deathrite. And it's Jace o'clock. Does Jeremy have any way to fight a Jace the Mind Sculptor here?
He does. He has Force of Will, but if he chooses, which would be a very reasonable choice, to tap 5 mana for Force of Will, then Luke Purcell can Flusterstorm and he's going to resolve the Jace. Jeremy Dasani, do you know if the players have deck lists?
They usually do.
Okay, so if they have taken a look at each other's deck lists, Jeremy knows that Purcell has access to the full 4 Flusterstorms, and he does choose to play around it there by pitching a card. Great play from Jeremy Dasani, and that's going to allow him to maintain his advantage on the board.
That was smart.
Yeah, Dasani's played very, very well over the course of the weekend. Potentially the best of any player that I've watched multiple rounds on camera.
Yeah, you don't get to be a player of the year by not understanding the subtle interactions of the formats that you're playing. And there's a Ponder for Jeremy. But there's a lot of problems here for Luke Purcell because Liliana, the Last Hope, is going to 7 loyalty this turn. And if Luke can't do something about Liliana, we could see a lot of zombies on the battlefield in just a couple of turns.
Pretty interesting sequence here. Jeremy cast Ponder, decided not to shuffle, drew into a Brainstorm, and then just cashed in the Brainstorm to get 1 card deeper in his library. A lot of subtlety there. I'm not sure what the best decision would have been.
No fetches there for Dasani.
No fetches. Okay. And it also begs the question of, if you only get to keep 1 card, do you want it to be a fetch land just to shuffle your library?
Sure. Oh, here we go. Luke just says land go, and that means Jeremy Dasani all ready to go with Liliana, the Last Hope. Going to finish resolving the Sylvan Library. But there it is. The ultimate has arrived, and with no pressure for Luke Purcell, is going to have an extremely difficult time beating this.
Well, he can survive for a few turns on the back of his board sweepers, but I think he's going to need Entreat the Angels, as we mentioned earlier, if he wants to actually trump the zombie tokens of Liliana, the Last Hope.
Well, let's see if he can find it. He's casting a Ponder, which could help set it up.
So if I'm Luke here, I want to draw into the Jace the Mind Sculptor and then plus it up to 5 and try to use it to dig over the course of a few turns when paired with board sweepers. Again, with the long run plan being Entreat the Angels, but you need some kind of intermediate plan to get you there. You can't really just hope to get lucky and draw it.
He's past the turn back.
You can hope to get lucky and draw it, but I would hope for something better than that.
Right. So is he going to set up Brainstorm for Terminus here?
Seems that way.
Or just take the 4.
He might Terminus at the end of the turn after the zombies have entered the battlefield, and that would be a great way to set up for Jace because then he can cast Jace and Brainstorm right away.
Okay, he's going to Brainstorm right now. There's that Jace, and he does have a copy of Terminus in his hand, so he can simply set that up for his draw step next turn. That would wipe away all of the zombies. You get 2 plus the number. So in this case, 4, and it's a Miracle Terminus. Bye-bye zombies. And then you want him to just slam Jace the Mind Sculptor here.
Yes.
Start digging.
Well, what are you waiting for? Those zombies are going to get you eventually. You can't really pick your spot too much longer.
Another Force of Will here for Dasani. Oh, he's got the hard cast Force of Will, and they're going to have to fight over it. And this means that Luke Purcell, assuming he wins this fight, is going to need to hit that land drop, and it looks like he's got it.
4 copies of Flusterstorm here.
Flusterstorm.
Okay, so this is going to successfully counter the Terminus, and Purcell's going to have to fetch a Tundra and cast Supreme Verdict. Then he's in a bad spot from there.
Yeah, because you like the ability to have Jace on an empty board, and now that's not going to be the case. He will have an empty board when he casts Supreme Verdict, but then Jeremy's are going to have 2 zombies by the time that Jace hits the battlefield.
Yeah, and remember, because Luke took that 4 damage, they're now lethal, regardless of whether he takes up or down Jace.
Right, he can't. Ugh. Wow, Jeremy Dasani with 2 counter spells there as the only 2 cards in his hand. And that's exactly what he wants at this point, given that emblem from Liliana, the Last Hope, is going to win him this game and the match as long as he can let it do its thing.
So he's looking at Abrupt Decay, Baleful Strix, Ponder. Seems like he wants to draw into Baleful Strix, cast it, and then Ponder.
Yep. Dig, dig, dig. Cast Ponder. And this gets him pretty deep into his library. He sees Abrupt Decay, Brainstorm, Verdant Catacombs.
He should Wasteland the Tundra, I believe. I think the mana is more valuable for Luke Purcell than it is for Jeremy Dasani.
Mm-hmm. He is considering his options. He's got Brainstorm in hand.
Boy, this game is not over. I mean, it's really hard for Purcell to overcome the Liliana Last Hope Ultimate. But wow.
Oh, a Terminus is going to give him that room that we wanted last turn, and now Jace the Mind Sculptor is going to hit.
That's a true miracle, Marshall.
Wow.
That was right after a fetch land.
Just peeled it.
Jeremy did not use the Wasteland. And here we have Jace and Luke Purcell, if he finds the right cards, can still win this game.
Oh, my goodness.
Wonder why he left the basic Plains
untapped. Why is the
Plains
Plains untapped when he has Counterspell in his deck? He must have something in mind. At any rate, he finds a bunch of cantrips with Jace. He is going to be able to see a lot of cards here. He's casting Ponder. I don't think he sees what he wants here, although it is cantrip, cantrip, cantrip. He's just going to let him go.
See, I think this is very costly that Purcell can't use another cantrip here.
It really is.
The basic Plains mana is just going to go to waste.
And he does not have any wiggle room here at all. He's going to be facing lethal again next turn, no matter what Dasani does. He may have just gotten a little excited there.
Draws Pyroblast off of the Ponder. Not immediately helpful, but I could envision a scenario where that becomes pretty relevant.
Well, no answers for Jace there. Abrupt Decay, another copy of Brainstorm, which I believe he has in his hand already.
Jeremy might want to draw an extra card at some point. It's pretty important with Brainstorm that you have more resources available to you.
We're going to see him fetch away some nonsense
here.
I
think we've seen players be both too aggressive and too conservative with their Sylvan Library extra draws over the course of this broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
But can't blame him. It's one of the most challenging cards in the game to play with.
It's also just extremely tempting. Hey, you want some cards? Yes. Yes. I have to pay what? All right. They're cards. I mean, that's why we play, right? Okay, so Jeremy's going to shuffle away and then cast the other copy of Brainstorm in his hand. I suppose he's just looking for, well, that. Permission spells?
Okay, so he found Force of Will, Baleful Strix, and Brainstorm. If he wants the ability to cast Force of Will, he has to keep that only because he'll need 5 mana to actually cast it.
Yep. Okay, that was Swords to Plowshares, which actually does keep Luke alive for an additional turn, does it not?
Yes, it does.
Oh, my goodness. This is getting interesting.
Jeremy's still not wastelanding the Tundra. He might be on the plan of cutting Luke Purcell on red mana.
Here's Portent. Land.
Shuffle.
Now he gets this card at the beginning of Jeremy's upkeep, right?
That's right.
So it could be Entreat the Angels?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, it could.
Oh, man.
But it's tricky. We know that Jeremy has Force of Will.
Mm-hmm.
Luke Purcell could play a Volcanic Island to have Pyroblast, but I think he shuffled it away. Also, there's the Wasteland complicating matters. So he may just pass the turn. He might Snapcaster a Ponder.
Snapcaster and a Ponder also ostensibly leaves him alive, as he can use it to just block one of the zombies.
Yep.
Has he not brainstormed with Jace yet?
He did. He started his turn by brainstorming with Jace. Then he shuffled away some cards with the Portent.
Okay, so he's just passing the turn now.
So Jeremy, end of turn, pulls the trigger on Wasteland. Luke Purcell floats the mana and Swords to Plowshares. Jeremy does not Force of Will the Swords. Holy cow.
Oh, my God.
That was another miracle, wasn't it?
That was another cold miracle, but the Force of Will counters it. Oh, he had shuffled into it, but Jeremy Dasani had the answer. I think Luke thought he had it. Oh, my God.
And, Marshall, that's a one of Entreat the Angels, so now it becomes very difficult for Luke Purcell to beat that Liliana the Last Hope emblem.
He actually hit it with that Portent? That is unbelievable. And Luke Purcell could do nothing but put his hand on his head. Unreal. Jeremy Dasani, the man with the plan, knocks Luke down to 1 and plays Death Right, which means that Luke is way up against it now. Can't imagine get out of it.
Snapcaster's supreme verdict to continue buying time, but what's he hoping for at this point?
Right.
Man, we brushed past it, but I think a lot of players might have been tempted to force of will the Swords to Plowshares because just at face value, it was going to be a lethal attack with the 2 zombies. But Jeremy Dasani showing great patience there, saving the force of will for Entreat the Angels.
It might have been correct, right? Like, what are the chances? What could possibly go wrong? He has one of, and he just cast Porton and shuffled. Like,
well, I think Jeremy Dasani and I are thinking the same way about this game, which is that what cards in Luke Purcell's deck can beat Liliana the Last Hope emblem in the long run? Sure, he's got 4 or 5 board sweepers in his deck, but once those run out, then what? The only single card that could actually overpower the zombies is Entreat the Angels. Now that that's gone, I think Luke Purcell could effectively draw the rest of his deck and not be able to win this game.
Right. So Jeremy correctly just focusing on the only card left that mattered.
Correct.
And it was not some impatient play where it's like, well, I'd rather win this turn, so I'm going to cast Force of Will on your Swords to Plowshares. Instead, he knew there was one card that mattered, and that was not Swords to Plowshares. And now, once again, Jeremy has assembled lethal. Nothing off the top here for Luke. He's going to brainstorm, but as you said, what is he digging for? It's brainstorm into more nonsense, right? He literally just saw 3 cantrips off of his brainstorm here.
He's going to run out of board sweepers eventually. He can find a Vendilion click and try to chip in 3 attacks in the air, but even that's tough in the face of a Baleful Strix.
Jeremy Dasani hanging on for life, but you know he's been in a great position ever since that emblem hit the battlefield, and the entire match has now revolved around that. Jeremy Dasani correctly assessing that as long as he keeps Luke from miracling and Entreat the Angels, he will win the game eventually, and that's exactly what's happened here.
Flavorful, if you ask me, the inexorable zombie horde just coming for Luke Purcell, and you can buy time, but
they're going to get you.
They're going to get you.
And once again, we see Luke Purcell playing multiple cantrips per turn, brainstorm into brainstorm, but what is he supposed to find? There's nothing left, and that's going to do it. Jeremy Dasani finds the win. Even Sam Black's got his hand on his head back there like, wow, that was a heck of a game. Luke, so close. He hit the miracle. He cold hit the miracle that he was looking for. But Dasani had the answer in his hand with Force of Will. And that means that Dasani's into the semifinals. So for those of you at home who are following along for Saturday Night Magic, Keaton Wood is going to be playing against Jeremy Dasani. That's the Miracles versus Sultai Control. So the same matchup again. Other side of the battlefield is Sam Black on lands versus Daniel Duterte on Grixis Delver. You're not going to want to miss the semifinals. We've got a short commercial break. When we come back, though, they will be in the feature match area and ready to go. See you then.